In part 1 of how to make a hard cap mannequin wig, I made this double shell base with added volume at the crown. I paused after adding bold highlights at the front of the wig, and now I carry on to complete the 60s style bob for a vintage Rootstein mannequin. We filled in the underneath of the wig, and now it's time to make a large closure that gives volume to the surface hair of the finished style. So this we need to make in advance, and it will ultimately be glued under the closures that create the middle part, and it gives volume to the finished look. So I take a set of clip-in extensions and cut off the weft and the clips, and now I need to soften the ends. Where I've cut that off, we want to kind of have a more tapered look. So I am putting it in 4 little bundles, and I'm going to put a crimp in it at about 1/3 through the hair. Not too much, just a little bit, just to sort of create a little bit more volume. This is quite confusing, just bear with me and you'll see what I'm doing. And we do this to all 4 of those bundles. I'm going to take these bands off, and then we're going to card the hair. A professional wig maker would call it carding, I think, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comb the hell out of it to try and shuffle the hair a little bit and make the ends taper a little bit more softly than what they are looking like right now. So I'm combing it in one direction with my broken old comb. I don't use my good hairdressing stuff when I'm making wigs. And keep shuffling it up. We want these ends to kind of disappear slowly rather than have a big chunky finish to them. The ends of the length are already quite tapered, but we just want that shorter distance from the crimping to the ends to taper off as much as possible. Now I'm putting it back in a tiny little ponytail, just approximately at the end of that crimped area. So you can see that volume that the crimping gives. So we've got 1/3, 2/3. Now I'm lucky enough to have another head shape. You could do this before, I guess, but I have another head. So I have drawn a horseshoe shape on some cling film, placed the silicone swimming cap over the top, and I'm going to just create a closure that fits somewhere between what we've just been doing and the middle part that we're about to create. So take your Yoo-hoo glue and trace over that U shape. Or an N shape, depending which way you're looking at it, I guess. Now I'm just taking this hair and dropping the shorter hair onto that U shape of Yoo-hoo glue. And pushing it through. Kind of trying to get a nice distribution of hair. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's good if you can. I'm taking a silicone kitchen spatula. I've taken the handle off because it's just easier to deal with. And I'm pushing that through, putting more glue on top of it, and using the silicone spatula to push that glue right through. Just trying not to let those little strings of glue get on the length of the hair. And I have a little offcut of hair that I'm just pressing into the glue, and that is just to give it a little bit more strength. And we're going to fold this hair over in a minute, and it just helps with that. And I'll put a little bit more glue on it, why not? And once it's dry, you can snip the rubber band. I think it's a good idea to cut it rather than trying to pull it off, because you might do some damage. Now we want to just fold this hair back, so I'm just sort of combing it, splaying it out. At least at the root area. I say roots, it's not roots, but the area where it's going to be glued to the wig base. I've got another rubber band that I'm just kind of going to try and flatten this hair out, and the rubber band's quite good at holding it out of the way. And now I'm going to use a iron on steam to just kind of flatten out and fold the hair just at that level where the glue is. I've got that comb wedged into the hair to just sort of flatten it out, and you don't want to get glue all over your iron. You don't want to flatten it too much because we want to keep a bit of volume in this, but it does need to have a real sharp bend in it. And don't burn your fingers. So if I can just ask you to click the thumbs up if any of this is new or interesting to you. My aim is to grow this channel, so I need all the likes and the subscriptions I can get. Thanks. Just comb the hair into place. And once it's dry, which is about only 20 minutes, doesn't have to be completely dry, you can peel it off. And this fits on here eventually, but this is going to be the last thing that we glue onto the wig. But you make it in advance. It's much easier to make this now. The little closures cross over from the other side and create the appearance of a center part, and they get glued under where that closure is sitting. I'm going to put a little piece of hair over the fringe to just hide the glue, and I'm going to do one that goes back from the crown. And I'm going to put that on there, and what that's going to mean is I'm basically creating where it falls from the crown by just attaching a little piece of hair, and I'm gluing that on now. And the aluminium foil prevents this piece of hair from drying flat. I need to have some spring in it. I'll just put a little bit of hair over that glue that's the surface of the fringe. So I've left this to dry for quite a long time, at least half a day. Next, I'm going to create the look of the center part. So to keep track of where I'm going to be gluing those small closures, I've placed the larger U-shaped closure where it's going to ultimately be sitting, and made a mark with a white pencil. Now I've got both the solid brown coloured closures and the ones that have the highlights in them, and I'm just alternating, gluing them around the front, making sure that they sit nicely around the face, and I'm alternating from left to right. And this is going to happen quite a lot. As I work towards the back, I will be changing the angle slightly. Once I get to sort of above the ear, maybe slightly behind above the ear, they will be straighter before they go around the curve of the crown of the head. And when I do that, I will turn the head around and I will show you how I manage that. After these are in place, we'll be gluing that very large closure on top of the area where these smaller ones are glued, and that's what gives more volume to the top of the bob as well as the padded crown. So I've turned it around, and this is that piece of hair that I first glued on that I'm holding at the moment, and I'm going to do a few on this angle pointing towards the center of the crown of the head on both sides, alternating back and forth just like the front. After I've done one or two, I pick up that small little piece of hair that was initially glued on, and now I'm gluing so that they sit under that central piece of hair. And this is what it looks like, and there is a small triangle you can see here where there is no hair, but you don't really need to worry about filling that in because the large U-shaped closure will take care of that. Just going to pick these little bunches up and tie them with very fine rubber band just to keep them out of the way when I glue the closure on underneath. It's an intermediate area between this middle part and all the hair that we originally stuck on, so we want to kind of keep this out of the way. Now I've just got them pulled up, and I'm going to glue this on top of the glue that holds those little middle part creating closures. There we go. Now we just stick that on there, press it in nice and firmly, and here we go. So it does need a little bit of cutting. I was aiming to do as minimal cutting as possible, but I do need to do some cutting, and you can see that original baseline there that I'm just gonna snip off with my big ugly shears. But I tried cutting this with my hairdressing scissors, and it's a nightmare. It's actually much easier to just use great big kitchen shears. And referring to what I said earlier about being able to see the guideline, imagine if I was struggling here with really long, heavy, full-length synthetic hair. It would be much more difficult for me to find that guideline and see it. So always, I think it's best to just glue the hair on at the minimum length, and that way you save on the hair and you also save on labor when you're trying to finish the style off. Win-win. And you can see how actually by the time you cut it shorter, the appearance of that curl that we put in has almost disappeared. It's only, most people would probably call that straight. It's got a little bit of a kick to it, and that's enough to help that bob turn under. But you certainly do not want poker straight hair for this look, because you're not going to get that 60s Beaufont kind of look that they had to their hair in the 60s. It would be much easier if the Sandy mannequin was looking straight ahead, but she is actually turning her head towards one shoulder, and that makes it quite tricky. Not all Rootstein mannequins have the same sized head, unfortunately. In the Rootstein factory, they would have a Sandy Shore head form that they made all the wigs on. And that way they don't have to worry about ruining any paintwork or anything, but I don't have the luxury of that, unfortunately, so this is why she's constantly covered in plastic wrap, kitchen wrap, whatever you call it. Well, you can see the big highlight that I put in the front there. You probably wouldn't want that on the surface, but it's permissible there because it only really becomes visible in the ends of the points at the front of the bob. isn't much point putting any of those big chunky streaks in the underneath because you won't see them. They're only really visible on the surface of a bob. I'm tempted to sort of speed this up, but I'm figure it's probably good to show how I am cutting this wig. But basically, do not be tentative, just get in there and do it. If you're worried, maybe just try and make it a little bit longer than what you anticipate. And notice how I'm actually around the front, I'm not even pulling on the hair, I'm just cutting it as it's falling. My caramel walls with that sunlight coming in the window is making this hair colour look quite different. Note to self, next time filming, make sure that the light is 100% correct. Sorry about the weird colour that everything's looking here. Here are these 60s highlights, and though they are chunky, they are not like zebra stripes, and that is because of that little bit of a combination of blonde and brown and that random nature of how I attach them to the base. Keeping an eye on the front points of the bob just to make sure that they are even and symmetrical. I am not an expert mannequin wig maker. This is only my third mannequin wig I've ever made, but it's something that I have been working towards for a long time, and I thought I would show you. And there we are. And here's what we end up with. A hard cap mannequin wig. Thanks for your support. There's a video about how I clean this mannequin using techniques best suited for vintage oil-based paint. I repair a crack that runs through her eye area. I then touch up her eye makeup. I make her the vintage mannequin style eyelashes you can see in these images.